Cool. Yeah, so let's begin. Last time, and carrying on now in part 3, we're programming a granular synth / audio effect from scratch. Not the craziest advanced granular audio effect ever, but hopefully pretty fun and pretty usable. Last time we got pretty far and got it pretty reliably working all the time and got the code working nice and looking really clean and tidy, so it'll be easy to maintain and add more stuff to in the future. So I think it's probably time to crack open live, hope it actually opens up and works, and then carry on. So last time, yeah, we did a lot of code tidying, and we also spent quite a lot of time just making everything work nicer. So everything was randomized, everything was randomizing all the parameters, allowing us to get those really nice dense grain clouds. And this time, something I wanted to approach last time but we didn't have time, as usual with Macs it often takes a little bit longer just to kind of do all the bits you want. So this time we're going to crack straight into adding transient detection, and after that we're going to hopefully have time to do some pitch quantizing and a few bits like that. So I'm just going to grab the device, which I haven't opened since last time, so let's hope it still opens and works, and open it up and crack on. Actually, let's just do a quick test. Why not? Is it going to work off the bat? Is it going to work off the bat? Well, clearly not. So obviously I didn't quite set up the loading thing quite properly, but yeah, at least after last week we have a pretty tidy, usable user interface that we can add more to and get cracking. My computer is horrendously slow trying to run streaming software and do Ableton at the same time. I've realised my little 13-inch MacBook unfortunately is just not designed for anything video going on at all. So apologies if it's a bit slow just to get everything started. Probably close terminal, and I'm not having to program terminal code, and just close that as well. And oh, great time. Cool, so let's open up our audio effect, and also let's quickly make sure the settings in Ableton so we can get our mic as well as our marimba thing, mbira, whatever they're called, the thumb piano thing we've been using for the last while. I've also grabbed a melodica, which I haven't used in ages, but is always pretty useful for granularizing, because we might actually be able to do some chords and stuff like that. Right. Wake up, computer. Cool, so this is where we were last time. Again, nicely tidied up and ready to add more stuff to. I'm not quite sure what oh, well, it wouldn't have started recording because I hadn't even set the audio interface properly. That would probably be why. But if I turn this on, we should be getting audio into the device. Yes. And if we then do some recording, check. Is it recording? It looks like it is. Yeah. And with any luck, the stuff we set up here, this live.device, is basically banging whenever the patcher is loaded. So it should be... Oh. Well, that is great. Apparently Mac's crashed. But it hasn't crashed. And it's still working. Oh well. If we start... Check is it recording? It looks like it is. Check is it recording? It looks like it is. Is it recording? Is it recording? Recording. Is it recording? Cool, so it is actually working after a bit of faffing around setting up the audio interface. So it looks like we managed to relatively successfully set up some default parameters so it will start making noise as soon as we get going. So, no recording, thank you. Cool, so stuff to add. At the minute, we, on the user interface side as well, we basically have a button to start the grains recording, and we have a button to actually trigger the grains at a set interval. So we're going to add some chaotic randomization to when the grains are being triggered, so it's not triggered so metronomically. We'll do some kind of randomization, sample and hold thing. Have to have a think how to do that to get it to trigger randomly rather than so metronomically. But the kind of main thing I want to do is one of the things I love about granular audio effects is when they work in real time to granularize incoming streams, so they're great for live performances or just for playing instruments or synths into. So what we kind of need to get happening is, it's partly why I designed it with this looping record buffer. So we can turn on looping and we can hit record and it'll basically just continually fill up the buffer over and over again with the last, say, 5 seconds of material. We could easily add in something to be able to edit the length and size of the buffer so we can have it recording for shorter or longer times. You could even be recording a minute or 2 minutes at a time, looping, and be effectively granularizing and calling back to past minutes of material. But one of the things I want to kind of add straight away is a way for us to effectively be analysing the audio that's coming in, working out when there's been a transient, so when we pick up a sudden, we'll probably just do it simply with volume. So when the volume goes above a certain threshold, we'll consider that to be the start of a transient. Some fancy transient detectors can also do stuff with the frequency. So you might be analysing changes. If you're analysing like drum material, for example, obviously you generally, or most stringed instruments as well, you generally get a sharp rise in pitch and then a quick decay of a pitch envelope when you're analysing transients. That's another way you can look out for kind of sharp changes in frequency from high to low often, as well as volume to detect transients. But we're just going to do a simple audio transient detector. And the thing after that you generally want is that effectively to work. So we're going to work out when there's been a transient. Out the bottom of this record object, we're being told where in the 5 second long buffer we are recording, which we've used to make this little kind of scroll along display, which scrolls along and shows us where in the buffer we're currently recording as I'm talking. And what we're going to do is we're going to look out for a transient, and whenever a transient happens, we're going to get where we are in the record buffer and we're going to jump the play start position to be at that point. So effectively what should happen is if we were doing something like playing in some of the melodica or the thumb piano thing I've got next to me that we'll try in a sec, whenever it detects there's been a new note, it should automatically jump to that new note and start granularizing and glitching it up. And hopefully we'll have a way to turn on and off transient detection, which will allow us to kind of maybe quickly be doing something like playing in chords, and whenever it detects a chord it will suddenly start granularizing and glitching that last chord, and then we can do some other little maybe solo single note improv over that, hold on another chord, solo improv over that, hold on another chord, and so on. So yeah, really good fun for live performance, or yeah, making weird sounds and sound design in the studio to use later as well. So let's crack on with making a transient detector. So a transient detector generally starts the same way as an envelope follower. So if any of you use modular gear or anything like that, you might be familiar with envelope followers and patching one up from scratch. If you're not so familiar with them, but you're probably using them in synths or software, obviously Ableton has a built-in envelope follower which you can use to modulate synths. A lot of other synths have them built in as well to modulate other parameters based on the volume. Envelope follower is also a typical circuit in the old auto wah guitar effects So it will listen to volume and it will apply a kind of filter with a nice resonant filter and sweep whenever whenever you follow in the input. So we've got the audio coming in here from our input source, which at the minute is just this mic that I'm talking into. We're getting that stereo signal because basically Ableton always operates in stereo even if you plug in a mono signal. We are doing something similar to what we did with the equal panning law down here at the bottom of our grain thing, but it turns out if you add two signals together, you might think, oh well, we just multiply them both by 0.5 and add them together. That actually decreases the volume. So what we're doing is we've created a little kind of cheap way to get equal power thing, so we shouldn't lose too much volume basically when we're summing these two signals into one. If you plug two audio cables into one input in a Max for Live audio device or Max audio device, it will just basically sum them together. So this is basically exactly the same. It's just saying we're going to add our left channel and our right channel. We're then going to multiply that down a little bit so it's not quite so loud. Because if you obviously plug two signals together and you've got a really loud left and right channel, it might clip or peak. So doing a little bit of volume reduction afterwards. After that, we're going to take our mono signal and we want to be turning it into an envelope shape. So the first thing you generally do in envelopes, let's make a little scope here as well so we can see what's going on, is if we plug our audio signal into a scope, we can, as an oscilloscope, we can kind of see it's going pretty crazy. Lots of stuff is happening very fast. And if you tried to map that to a parameter, like an envelope follower, or if you were trying to detect transients and changes in that, there would be loads, and you'd be getting triggers all the time. So we need to kind of slow down that information and generate a more usable, nice kind of rising, falling, slow envelope thing, rather than this crazy super fast waveform. The other thing is digital audio generally operates around 0, and it goes up to +1 and down to -1, which is why you might be used to seeing waveforms and sine waves kind of oscillate around that 0 crossing or 0 point line. Envelope followers, obviously we generally don't modulate parameters in a bipolar fashion. So if you made a kind of bipolar envelope follower, I guess you could set a dial here and it could modulate it either side of it. But that's more what you get with a LFO. Generally, when we're building envelope followers, we only want unipolar automation. So we'll set a dial at a certain position, and as we automate it, it'll pop into the positive range. It won't oscillate either side of its range in a bipolar fashion. Generally, envelope followers are unipolar. So the first thing we do generally is we stop there being any negative numbers. So we basically want to stop any values going below the 0 crossing line. All the waveforms should just go positively. And to do that, we are going to do a little bit of maths function thing, which luckily is just enclosed in a single object. We're going to force all values to be absolute. So that's quite simple to show, hopefully. Basically, I think this should work. Let's hope it works. It stops any numbers from going into the negative range, and if they try and go negative, they actually just come out positive. So as we go positive, it's just normal. If we try to go negative, basically it just deletes that minus sign and it just goes positive again, is one way of thinking of it. But if we take our signal and we now run it through an absolute function and then into the scope, we should see the one on the left is our full bipolar signal going positive and negative over the 0 crossing line. On the right hand side, we're now only going positive, so we can use this to make unipolar automation and modulation of the signal rather than bipolar. But the signal is still very, very fast, and in fact, because we've kind of made it absolute, it's almost twice as fast, you could think of it, because all of the values that are folding negatively are now folding positively. So if you were to design transients from this, you might even get kind of double the frequency or double the speed, which is something you get if you say, again, modular synth analogy, if you were running an LFO into an absolute circuit, it would the LFO would come out kind of almost seeming like it was doubling the speed of the modulation in some ways. So the next thing we need to do is we need to slow down this signal. So I'm going to make one more scope, and one way to slow down signals is to basically apply smoothing. There's a few different smooth objects you can use. Ramp smooth offers linear smoothing. So if we look at our audio example here, we've got a square wave on the left hand side, hopefully that's visible enough, and on the right hand side we're applying some smoothing, so those sharp jumps from positive to negative can be smoothed linearly to create ramps. And we can generally, with all these smoothing things, you can control the up and the down time. You might think of it as the attack and release in kind of envelope follower terms. Slide is pretty much the same thing but logarithmically. So we're generating curves. Hopefully you can see kind of logarithmic curves rather than no, it's not logarithmic, it's up in zero. You should see it kind of curves down to zero rather than flies linearly. Generally, when we're working with audio, we're working in logarithmic land, especially when we're analysing volume, because we generally analyse volume in decibels, which is a logarithmic scale rather than linearly. So typically in envelope followers you will use a slide over a ramp smooth object. So let's go with our slide. So we're going to filter the audio logarithmically or smooth it out. So effectively smoothing audio signals is a kind of filtering, if you did not know about that. I don't still really understand half these things because they are super confusing maths things, but generally if you're trying to smooth a value, what you're doing is, so if you think of filtering, like if you make a low pass filter, basically you're filtering off sharp changes in a signal. So similarly you can apply that, and digital audio is just numbers, so when you're generating filters you're effectively reducing sharp changes between the numbers. At least that's my vague understanding of it, not being great at maths. So weirdly enough, effectively this slide object effectively is like a filter, and that's why if you're in modular synth land, you might be familiar that you can use different things to do smoothing and gliding, apart from just a straight glide thing. You can actually technically do it with different types of filters and stuff like that, which is weird to think about. Hopefully I'm not totally chatting breeze. I swear that's the concept, at least in my head with my vague understanding of it. Anyway, so we have an absolute signal. We have a signal we are going to slide to smooth it out. The slide object takes a argument for the attack, you can kind of think of it, and it takes an argument for the decay, you could kind of think of it. The arguments are in samples. We should see if we hover over that, or maybe we'll open the help file to see. Slide up in samples, slide down in samples. So just for the hell of it for now, let's type 50 samples and 1,000 samples. Will that do something, hopefully? It would, but for some reason Max has frozen. Is it because I'm using test version again? Resave, no worries. Okay, so let's try fiddling with these values until we get something a bit more useful. Check, 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 check. Okay, so what we should start to be seeing here now, if we compare these three oscilloscopes, on the left we have a bipolar full speed audio signal. In the middle we have a unipolar version because we've just made it go absolute, and on the right we're now applying some sliding, so you can see what was a quite rough spiky signal we can smooth out a bit to get kind of smoother values that take longer to change, which will be more useful for us when we are trying to either apply this to a parameter or for doing what we're doing for analysing volume changes. So the next thing we want to do is, as with most envelope followers, depending on the material, waveforms take longer to finish a cycle depending on the frequency of the material. If you're working with quite medium or high frequency instruments or audio input, the changes in the waveform happen very quickly. Obviously, if you're working with bass material and low bassy notes, the wave cycles take longer to finish. So in order to get good, useful information out of them and to do transient detection well, generally speaking, you might want to tweak the attack and the release time differently depending on what kind of material you're working with. So for that end, we want to be able to change these numbers on the fly from the user interface of our Max for Live device. I'm going to make a quick live comment, call it video analysis. That'll do. And we've made it absolute. We're going to slide it, and we want to be able to control these two values in the user interface. They are both in samples, as we can see from having a look in the help file. Samples are not really typically something you're editing in a device's audio interface, partly because depending on the project you're working in, you might be working at different sample rates. And so if you were thinking of this in terms of samples and you changed a project and loaded up a different project with a different sample rate or something, you might suddenly be getting slightly different results from your audio analyzer. So generally in audio software, we're not working in samples because it's just not that nice to think about them in those terms. So what we want to do is change to working in our nice old milliseconds, because milliseconds are a lot, or seconds is a much more understandable time format and generally what we work in. So luckily there are some some objects such as ms2sans, which pretty much does what it says on the tin, and we can send in milliseconds up here, and I believe at the right outlet we should get seconds. So I think my sample rate is currently 44.1, so if I typed in 1000 milliseconds, which would be 1 second, we should get 44.1 at the bottom. So this object is just doing the job of converting from milliseconds to samples so we can have a better, more user-friendly user interface. So we're going to want to change from milliseconds to samples for the attack, for the up, and we're also going to want to change from milliseconds to samples for the release or the down portion of the wave. We're going to make a couple of Max Live number box user interface objects. One is going to be the rise and fall, attack, release. I don't know how you like attack, release. No, that kind of sounds more rise and fall. Screw it. I prefer those in these contexts. I'm not sure why. One is the rise, and in opening the inspector and having a look, I'm going to name it rise is too brief. Analyzer rise. Why not? Just so we can. So again, these long and short names, these are what are going to appear in Live's automation. If you try to automate these parameters of Max for Live device, these are names you're going to see in automation selection over here and stuff. So having useful names, so we can select our MMM Max, near Max images. Maybe that's why I named it that. But you can see these parameters. Some of them are actually useful because we've actually labelled them. Some of them I haven't quite labelled properly, but I think some of these random ones that I haven't labelled, they'll just appear as random names like live.txt. Obviously, if you're later trying to automate this device, having just words like live.txt or having duplicate names is of no use really. So at the end of programming a device, or as you go, it is a good idea to open up the inspector window and rename the long name so you can get a useful name in the automation view. Short name doesn't matter so much, but that's particularly useful on dials. The short name is what you see at the top, so you often want to set it for that reason, but I often just set them a bit shorter. For things like live numbox, it doesn't matter so much. And if we're in millisecond land, we're going to turn the units to time and a decent range. I guess does this sliding even work with 0 milliseconds? Hopefully it just kind of turns itself off when you set 0 milliseconds, so you can set up some kind of switching system to remove it from the path. You probably would never want to go that long. And smoothing, if you kind of smooth over a second, I have a feeling it's pretty much going to be no change. So what happens if we give that? I can leave this one. Initial attack value, 100 seems to be doing a good job. What is 100 in milliseconds? That's going to convert the other way. 100 is kind of, that's 10 milliseconds. Default to 2 milliseconds. We can always change these defaults later if we need to, but the attack we're going to default to 1 millisecond, because generally you want, especially if you're doing transient detection, you generally want the initial change in volume to be picked up quite quickly and have an immediate audible effect. It's then the release we want to have to be a longer number, so it kind of decays off slowly. Obviously you can reverse these and mess with them for different kind of effects if you're just using it as an envelope follower, but in our case, as largely a transient detection thing, we generally want a quick attack or rise and a slow fall or release. So we're going to copy that dial where we edited its settings already. Going to rename the long name, so we've got a useful automation name in live. Happy with that range, and 10,000 seems to be doing something kind of useful here. Maybe could even be a bit different because we're still getting some quite sharp. Oh no, it's because reset to 2, so I did that. Let's have a look what comes out and see if we can get to around 10,000. That's 100 milliseconds. No, 200 milliseconds. No, that's way too much. 500 milliseconds? My brain is not good. 250 milliseconds, that seems to be decent. Let's restart the initial. So it's initially going to set to 250 on the full and 2 on the rise, and that seems to be giving us a pretty decent envelope follower output. So that's how you make a envelope follower in Max for Live, basically. You could then take the output of this and map it to parameters in this Granular Synth. Why not? Let's just do that. Yeah, why the hell not? Pitch. That's going to sound really stupid, but let's do it. Pitch works from -48 to +48 semitones. So for the hell of it, let's remap our output from here, which is going from 0 to 1 now. Max, although I think maybe because I'm not quite loud enough, it's never quite reaching 1. Getting close. So we're going to remap from -1. This is going to sound really bonkers, but from -48 to 48. This is an audio signal, yellow cable. You can upload yellow cables into MIDI style standard data devices. So as we talked about last week, hopefully we need to convert from an audio / jack / XLR cable, you can think of it. We need to convert down into MIDI land, because you can't just plug a jack cable into a MIDI input. There's one way to think of it. So we use a snapshot object which captures the audio signal every 30 milliseconds and outputs the audio signal. When I talk louder it should get higher. When I talk louder it should be low. Yeah, and this will give us a mad range of numbers that's going to change the pitch, all kinds of crazy. Why not? Let's make me sound more like a chipmunk and go from 0 to 48 only. And we could effectively plug this straight into this dial and see when I talk, it now jumps the parameter up. Yeah, so if I actually record it into the buffer something, what would start happening? Whoop, don't hit the mic. And do a thing, and start running the playback as well. Turn down that. Let's record something sensible into the buffer. Check, check. 1, 2. Check, 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 check. 1, 2. That's in the buffer now. Now we're going to play back the grains. I talk, it does the pitch and makes it sound really weird. That's kind of working at least. And yeah, so you could build a envelope follower just like this and put it into any patch if you wanted to have more complex envelope following stuff going on in the patch than you can achieve with the built-in Max for Live envelope follower, which to be fair does a pretty good job. But say you wanted to build some weird inbuilt modulation matrix into your synth for audio effect where every parameter could be affected from your one audio input, that would save a lot of processing, potentially from loading that many audio input flows. And yeah, you could program some quite interesting or more complex envelope follow behavior and modulation matrix into a synth for audio effects by programming your own envelope follow, which is what we've just done there. But again, we are not envelope following, at least not for the minute. What we really want is we want a transient detector. So we have a couple more stages to do. And we now have a nice smooth signal that is operating in a unipolar fashion. Next thing we want to do is we want to find a way to grab when the signal goes really high and kind of when it goes low. And to do that, we're going to kind of set a threshold similar to what you might do on a kind of compressor kind of thing. We're going to want to be able to set a decibel level, and we're going to want to be able to say if the volume goes above this set volume, consider that a new note. You could also set a release, for example, if you wanted the transient detector to have more of a gating functionality rather than a triggering functionality. Instead you could make it, more of a gate, so you could set a threshold and have whenever it rises above a certain value, it, what have I done? Is it this version of Max? Is it this testing version of Max? I've been doing loads of visual stuff recently, trying to make cool visual tools to glitch up live stream videos, and also just helping someone out, teaching them a little project. And for some reason, since I started doing all this visual stuff, I just keep managing to crash Max all the time. But again, I think my laptop just does not like having to do OBS, screen grabbing, camera grabbing, and all of these things at the same time. It just has a really hard time and ends up crashing Ableton or Max fairly regularly at the minute, which is an absolute pain in the ass, but there you go. Now let's go from scratch just in case anything weird's going on. Where are we? Let's get our Max for Live device back open and crack on transient detection. Trying to get onto a video track. Video track, thank you. Oh, this computer is so slow when trying to do video stuff at the same time. Come on, you can do it, computer. That's some fun. I should put on like a block of ice or something. Right. We're pretty much back to where we were. Let's open the device up and hope Max or Ableton doesn't crash again, just for fun. That would be very annoying. But yeah, so what we're going to be doing is we now have a transient detector, a envelope follower basically. We're going to program something that allows us to set a volume threshold, and whenever we go above that threshold we consider there to have been a new transient. Whenever we go below that threshold we are going to consider there to have been an end of that transient, so that transient or note has kind of finished. So it's particularly good for drums, or kind of playing quite plucked, pizzicato kind of style string sounds. If you're doing very long, drawn out, bowed violin sounds where you might have much slower attacks and much longer falls, it becomes harder to build transient detectors, and that's kind of when you want to get like the frequency involved, because rises in frequency you might be able to set and help with kind of tracking transients in violins and stuff. But that's what we're going to add now, and looks like the patch is open and actually working again. Let's make ourselves a bit more space by getting this granular engine out of the way of the audio a bit. Cool. Input. Converting to a positive range. Smoothing it out. Next step. Fresh. Yeah, I remembered what it's called. I've obviously built enough envelope followers over the years. Cool, so the threshold is a nice, pretty simple audio device that lets us set a low threshold and a high threshold, and it will trigger a kind of 1 and a 0. So it will send out the bottom an audio rate. It will send a 1 when the signal goes above the threshold. It will send a 0 when the signal goes below the threshold, as we should see if I change this above 1. And now if I go back below 0. So that's how fresh works, and that is what we're going to use to work out when there's a transient. So I should be able to run that into here. And what do these operate on? It says signal / float to set the threshold high and low. We're just going to use float. We don't need to be controlling that at audio rate. Look at some weird mad patch it did. I think it probably just works. Let's have a look in the help file. It probably just works in kind of linear. Yeah, because it could be any number. Yeah, so it's not in decibels. You're effectively just setting a number. It could be any number. You could even be looking out for numbers well up into higher ranges if you're doing some other kind of audio programming. So this is just operating from 0 to 1 in our case, because we're analysing audio, and it'll kind of just be operating. We'll be editing those numbers with 2 num boxes. We need to do a bit of conversion to sort those out a little bit. So at the bottom we should now be getting a signal. Oh wait, let me just set defaults. Let's set a default of 0.2 and 0.7. Is that going to work? Is it going to work? Let's see. Hello? Yeah, hello? Not quite. Let's have a look at the numbers actually coming out. I have a feeling 0.7 might be a little bit too high. I don't think I'm ever hitting 0.7. Yeah, let's lower this a lot. 0.1, 0.3. That going to work? Check. 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 Cool. So we should be seeing now, if I speak loud enough, it's considering it to be a transient. When I stop speaking, it drops below again. If I stay really quiet, it shouldn't peak, but then if I go loud, yeah. So we've kind of we've turned our envelope follower into a transient detector in a way, because it's just giving us, transient detection generally just gives you on or an off. We don't work in smooth automation values like we do with an envelope follower, which is what we've got above. But again, like with the slide, depending on the kind of audio material you're working with, you often want to be able to change these values to be different values depending on what you're working with. And we don't want to be changing these in a kind of linear 0 to 1 fashion, because just like with the slide object, working in samples isn't really the go-to thing. You're generally working in milliseconds when you're talking about time parameters in audio software. Similarly, with a threshold object, which effectively is analysing volumes and audios, we don't generally work in the 0 to 1 range, we work in the decibel range. So we are going to want a to dB here. So that's another built-in, nice simple conversion object. MS to sample automatically converts samples to milliseconds. A to dB automatically converts amplitude to decibels. So again, if we type in 0, which would be an amplitude of 0 or completely off, you can see it's setting its gain slider to be minus infinity. As we kind of rise upwards towards 1, we get to unity gain, or 0 decibels, that one. And really on this kind of slider or live gain example, you can really see that logarithmic curve in effect. As we kind of go lower, we can see very short changes. You can get all the way to half, so between 0 and 1, halfway up is 6 decibels, half the volume. You know, there's massive change. There's not much change seemingly on the dial amp between the decibel values between 0.5 and 1, because that logarithmic curve, as soon as we get below 0.3 or something, oh god, even lower, we're going to see massive jumps. So just in between 0 and 0.1, we're going from minus infinity up to like minus 20 decibels. Logarithmic curve in action. Cool, so we're going to plug those two conversion objects into the threshold. And we're going to make a couple of live.num boxes again. This time they are going to control the volume of the attack, effectively the high threshold crossover and the low threshold crossover point. Yes. Probably won't duplicate these yet. We'll set the settings first. So again, open up parameter window. I'll zoom in on this a bit actually. That's a bit nice. So we are going to inspect our live.num box, and we want it to be decibels. So first thing we do is change the unit type to loudness. Decibels in Ableton, if I remember, around minus 70, it effectively just considers to be infinity. I'll set it to minus 80. No, let's do minus 70, and maybe we'll again program some weird thing where if it ever goes below minus 70, automatically set it to 0. Because on a logarithmic scale, I think you effectively never actually hit 0 or truly off. Not that it makes too much of a difference in this case, but sometimes you just need to be aware of that. You can end up with a leak-through volume because you've never actually quite hit 0 and multiplied the signal down to 0 if you're doing some volume fading. So from minus 7, I mean typically in live you get all the way up to 6 dB. I don't think we'd ever want to do that. So this one on the left is actually the release, or the low threshold effectively. What would be a good low value? Well, why not actually use a live.gain object and try and get some idea of what's coming through here. Check, 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 check. Oh god, this is quite quiet. I think it's because on the mic that is going to the audio, I have some effects. Aha! There you go. Yeah, built into the sound card. Cool, so that should be a lot louder already, more usable. So, low threshold. Let's say the low threshold is probably going to be low threshold, check, check. About there. Minus 20 decibels. So let's say the low threshold with this current signal of my mic, and the way it's got some compression on it in my sound card, minus 20 is a good low volume. Not a number, man. If you've ever done stuff with yeah, you might be used to seeing stuff like that. It's great. Oh god, and it's the wrong way around. We're not going amplitude to decibels, we're going decibels to amplitude. Well, that would be why. So it's not man, not a number. Oh, bang. So it turns out minus 20 decibels is exactly 0.1, which is what we ended up setting this to make it work nicely anyway. Bing. Next, we want to get a good attack setting. So yeah, with this compressor on the channel, it's actually going pretty loud all the time, hopefully drowning out some of the other audio and drowning out my fans in the background. Hopefully the mic having a different kind of super cardioid or whatever pattern's helping it a bit. Cool, so I'm actually peaking really loud, so this could actually be minus check, 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 check. Probably could be around, it's going to be minus 9. And let's check what that -9 value is, and we'll set that to be the default in here as well, just in case, although these live num boxes should be on load of the device setting the default number 3 anyway. But that one we want to default to -20, so we're going to set its initial in the parameter area of the inspector window. This we want to default to whatever, -6 dB I think we just said. I do say -9. Oh, and again we are in decibels converting to amplitude. Got it right, -9. Oh, that looks ugly. Let's just go to -6. -6 is basically 0.5. So we're going to set this initial value to be -6, and we'll set that to be 0.5. And that should be a basic default. And now when you hear me talking, you should be seeing down here, check, 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 check. We can kind of see our transient detector picking up when there's a transient and dropping down when there isn't. This is only a single, I don't know if we've really covered it before, but so far probably most of the debugging we've been doing has been probably, I guess, just using single objects like this number viewer or message boxes to see what's going on and coming out of objects. Sometimes, like in this case, what you actually need to do is see a stream of information to check if things are happening too quickly or too slowly. And to do that in Max, we instead use the Max console window, which you can generally find on the right hand side by pressing Command M and clicking the little console icon. And that will allow us to print messages to the console, which is what it's known as in a kind of typical programming language sense, and that should allow us to see what's coming out of this threshold. Oops, and again, that's an audio signal, so I can't just... Actually, I probably can just ram it into a print. I think they made print really clever now, did they? Yeah, they made print really clever. Oh, just a signal. That's not quite as clever as I thought it was. Snapshot tilde, say that snapshot the audio signal every 30 milliseconds and turn it into audio. Check. That's giving us a lot of numbers, so we're going to want to first change that to filter out repetitions. Chuck that in there, and we should have got rid of any repetitions. So, yeah, so over in the console window here we can see that when I'm talking loud, the volume is staying thinking it's a transient, and when my volume drops off it should go back to 0. And when I speak again it should go up, and then it will drop off. So we're kind of detecting when there is a note or something going on. If we fiddle with the attack and release setting, we can radically change how this is affecting it. So if I set this to an even lower volume, a lower number, check, check, we should start getting effectively even more immediate check, 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 check. Kind of feels like it. We're getting even more immediate changes noticed in the signal. And full-wise, you can, at the minute, you can see I can talk for quite a long time, and because of the smoothing, it's still holding it, considering it to be one note or one phrase, and then it releases. If we started lowering this full volume, we could get to the point where it might start even picking up in between notes, or words in this case. So maybe if we try lowering it a bit, what starts happening is it might start picking up these quick changes a bit easier. Maybe? Check, 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 check. I think we might also need to do, let's set this window, and also you can do some stuff to change live.meter. This could be handy to see what's going on with the input signal. Can we get a decibel display out of live.meter? Surely we can. Maybe. What does this do? Well, not as usual. Can you show me some useful information? Live.meter. Can you? Can you not? I don't think you can. Well, that's kind of not so useful, is it? I guess they don't really have much going on in live view anyway. But yeah, you could use this to see what... You could make a kind of slider on the side, or just do a quick hack and chuck a gain next to it. That's the same size roughly. Oh god, can I get rid of that? I'll help a little bit maybe. I'm not kind of be able to make a judge of where to set these thresholds. I think if we lowered this threshold a lot, we could start picking up individual words a bit easier. So now, maybe it would start... No, still not doing it. What about there? Is this going to work? I'll lower this a lot as well. Basically, I'm just trying to figure out if we can get to the point. The point is basically you can fiddle with the settings of a transient detector like this, setting the rise and the fall. Oh, seems to be picking up the words a little bit better now, maybe. Better, now, maybe. Yeah, so you can fiddle with it depending what input source you're getting and what kind of results you want. You can fiddle with the settings of the threshold, kind of low threshold, high threshold, and also with the rise and fall time, and that will give you, will change the way or how many transients you're getting detected. That's one quick way to make a kind of transient detector out of it. And at the minute we're in audio land, getting an audio signal out the bottom, which is fine for now. One of the things we want to get though is, instead of having an audio signal, we want to be getting just a bang. We want to get into out of audio signal jack XLR kind of land into just max kind of MIDI style signal speed messages, control data, as it's kind of known in max, because we want to use this when we receive a transient on. What we're effectively looking to do is we are looking to do some kind of max programming. Whenever we detect a transient, again back to the beginning of the video, when we detect a transient we want to work out where we are in the record buffer, and we want to set the playhead to that position in the record buffer, so we immediately start playing at that position and granularizing the last note that came in. So to do that we need to use some messages that I have forgotten, some objects that I've forgotten what they are. I have a feeling it might be the edge object. Edge, detect logical signal transitions. Use the edge to detect 0 to non-zero and vice versa signal. I mean that, yeah, we're getting out here 0 to 1. So that goes from 0 to non-zero, and this goes from non-zero to 0. 0 to non-zero? And non-zero to 0. Okay, let's see what the hell happens if we plug out of this. It may get us down into check. Check. Okay, yeah, so effectively it looks like, should be more useful, I'll check these here. The edge object, which I think God actually remembered the right edge, but effectively when it goes above the threshold, we get a bang out here. When we then drop below the threshold, we get a bang out the right hand side. You could have done this by going to a snapshot and then doing some other logic, but I think technically, because the threshold, the snapshot converts things down to 30 milliseconds, this is a better, quicker, I think, hopefully faster way of getting from audio down into kind of MIDI data speed messages, and it gives us a bang out the left hand side when we go over the threshold, so when a transient starts, or a note starts, or a phrase starts, and it goes bang out the right hand side when we have ended the note or the phrase. For the minute we're probably only going to deal with the start, but again, just like we could map this envelope to do some cool stuff in the patch, controlling parameters based on our voice, build a complex modulation matrix where it can send different things to different things. We could also be triggering, and so we could For instance, you could program something where only when a note starts, you start granularizing. Oh no, you could do the opposite. That'd be quite interesting actually. Maybe if we have time we'll do that. But you could program a system where whenever you start talking, whenever a transient or a note or a phrase happens, the granularization stops and it records that bit of the buffer, and then when you stop talking, that then this little haunting kind of granular thing hangs around. So you can actually turn the granular player to stop and start based on these outputs here. So that's basically transient detection and envelope following in Max for Live or /Max. Two other things we might want to quickly add in, but I might skip over. No, I'm not going to skip over. Cross. So one thing you typically want to do is filter out frequencies. So generally, depending on what you're working with, you want to maybe filter off high and low changes. And so crossover is a simple crossover filter object that operates on hertz, just like a normal filter. So you can design kind of crossover filters pretty simply. So what we're probably going to want is to have a low crossover point, and maybe we want to have a high crossover point as well. You can also use these nicely to make multiband transient detectors or multiband audio analyzers. So we could quite simply be running the audio in here, and we've now got one crossover filter, so that's effectively the bass or anything below 80 Hz in this example. The rest of the audio above 80 Hz is now coming down, passing to another cross object. If we say set this to 300 Hz or something, this would now effectively be the mids, and this would effectively be anything over 300 Hz, or effectively kind of what you can think of as the highs. If we copied this section of the patch here 3 times, we could effectively have a bass, mid and high audio envelope follower or transient detector, and be triggering different things based on the bass notes. So you can quite quickly have different parameters being triggered based on the bass, the mids and the highs. Good for audio visual stuff. Or yeah, other just weird parameters. Obviously you can do a similar thing in live if you program some EQs and filters and put envelope followers after each of them and stuff like that. But if you are building a device where you want that all to happen in patch, it's not too tricky to do. Cool, so basically what we probably want is we want to roll off a load of the low frequency, generally speaking, with a transient detector, especially one coming from a microphone. We don't want any low rumbles and things kind of interrupting our transient detection, and we might also want to roll off a load of high signals, but it's kind of not so needed, I guess. And the way I've set these up is the audio signal is now coming in here. So it's anything lower than 80 Hz comes out here, anything higher comes out here. So we're carrying on, we've effectively filtered off everything below 80. We're coming into another crossover object, and now this one's crossing over at 18,000, so near the top range of human hearing. Anything lower than that comes out here, so that's going to be our usable signal. Anything above that comes out the right, so that we're going to get rid of as well. So what we should be able to do in theory, does Live has a useful spectroscope, doesn't it? Spectral scope. What would happen if I chuck this in here straight away? Okay, let's change this to be logarithmic. Yes, that's a bit more usable. So this is a kind of a spectrogram of the audio that's coming from my voice with low frequencies on the left. How do I make you display what's going on? You're not really showing anything, are you? Amplitude, spectrogram, what's sonogram? Oh, we could use a sonogram. Sonograms are lovely, aren't they? Sonogram recoloured, please. Ooh, nice coloured sonogram. And probably the frequency can go up in linear. Maybe? No, it's not terribly useful. Anyway, I'm just faffing around making pretty visuals now. But, reverse draw. Is that one I like? Scroll. That's my preferred. Yeah, so this is a frequency view of my voice coming in. and hopefully these crossover filters are working. So the lows are at the bottom, the highs are at the top, and the louder the frequency is, the brighter the colour, from black, purple up to green and reds. If I was to make a live.numbox, numbos, definitely not, oh it's actually live. We're going to make one to control the low frequencies, and we're going to call it analyzer filter low, and we'll just short name low. We are in frequency because we're controlling the cutoff of a filter. Initial, yeah, 80 Hertz, why not? Let's cut off anything below 80 Hertz, at least in the example of a voice. We don't really want to care about that, and most drums anyway, they get a nice high, sharp transient on the kick, sharp, sharp. You can kind of see those nice notes up there. That we could just be analysing those rather than all this muddy middle stuff. Generally when we're messing with frequency and volume, because they're logarithmic, we often want to control them in a bit better way. At the minute, if we scroll this dial, we're going to scroll forever to get up to 22,000 or whatever we set it to. Let's say the zero is lowest is 20 Hertz, the highest is 20,000 Hertz, human range of hearing. Generally, yeah, you want to set a logarithmic scale on these, otherwise it takes ages to scroll up to 20. So maybe explain that a bit, but I can't remember. I think it's like an exponent pound 5 allows us to kind of dial in 20 Hertz to like a few hundred quite nicely, and then after that we start ramping up really quickly, because you don't need to, you're very rarely trying to get discrete values between like 12k and 20k, at least in this example. Cool, so crossover low, we're filtering off low frequencies before our audio analyzer, and I'm just going to duplicate this for the high frequencies. So we've kind of made like a band pass filter effectively, where we can sweep off the lows, sweep off the highs. We could make a nice filter view with the analyzing stuff, but 2 boxes should do us enough. The main job of this device is obviously not making some kind of filter, so we don't need to worry too much about the user interface of that. I think default value for the highs, pretty much not doing anything, 18k. Boom. So you can see my voice coming in. If I start sweeping, and check if the program is actually working at all. If I start sweeping up, we should effectively start seeing less and less of this. Yeah, so you can see I've swept off all the way up to 1.3k, and we're pretty much getting nothing coming through the spectrogram. If I start sweeping all the way down, we're going to allow some bass through all the way down to really, really low bass notes, which we don't need, especially if you start accidentally hitting the mic stand or something or getting weird rumbles. And similarly, if we sweep down from 18k, we should start rolling off all the highs. So if there's some weird high signals or high noise in your input source, you can roll off that. So we could actually make a kind of really tight transient, detect transient just in a really tight frequency range, basically, is what we've done. So we've now got a high and a low filter as well, and we're just going to insert those in between the input signals. So we're doing a bit of filtering on the way in. I'm going to make a live.comment filter, tidy up the text a little bit. That's a filter, that's a filter. Lows, that is the filter. That's the high cutoff frequency, that's the low cutoff frequency. That's the filter bit of code. That's probably using a low CPU, so you can go over now. You can give some space. That would be nice. Out the way, please. Get you in the right place in the code. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Replace this meter with a live. In fact, you don't even need these meters. Live has a thing right before the device anyway. We've got a meter right here, but I mean, if you wanted to, you could. Oh, why not? Maybe you could place a nice one. Get rid of you. chuck you in here. Got a nice live style meter. We have our high and low cutoff filter for the analyzer. We have the audio analyzer, and we've got the rise and fall, controlling how quickly it rises and falls. And the envelope follower, and then we have, and this is kind of like a threshold, let's just call it threshold for now, and that's effectively, this is the threshold, low, and yours threshold high. So basically just creating comments and making them so we can actually make a slightly useful user interface for them. We want to put those in the presentation as well. And do we want, I mean, we could leave the scope in if we wanted to. So we could set the range from 0 to 1 instead. We could turn off this weird line thing that's going on. Oh no, that didn't work at all. I don't know, you can make this look nice with live user interface, couldn't you? Background, pure black. Let's go goth. I don't care about the grid, we don't really need to know about the grid. Phosphor colour, I think that's actually what I'm just messing around with. They changed their colour thing recently, and I can never remember quite how it works. It wasn't even that recently, it was probably ages ago, and I still just haven't even bothered to work out how it works nicely. I mean, maybe some kind of nice bright orange colour or something. That'll do. Maybe we'll just get rid of that in the end anyway. But that's giving us our envelope, and we can put that in the user interface. And I think we also want these bangs in so we can see where there's been a on and off. And in live terms, is it button? Live.button? Is that it? Ooh, not that. Live.button? Yeah, that gives us a nice live style user interface. Bang. And we can get rid of this now as well. Tidying up and making user interface. There we go. So that's a somewhat neater and more usable user interface. These buttons here are actually just displays effectively, so we're going to disable people from clicking them, and we don't want to automate or store them, they're actually just being used as a display. So in the inspector I just selected both of those live user interface objects, turned off clicking so people can't click them, and they're not going to be visible to mapping because we don't want to MIDI map them, and they are hidden. Hidden, that's going to remove them from the automation lane as well, so we don't have to worry about that. Save, please don't crash, please don't crash. Yeah. And now we need to organise our user interface, because now we've got all of these things everywhere. By the way, if you hover over a comment or text box or things like that and press Command J, it shrinks it down to just the size of text, which is very handy. And we could kind of, again, people get paid good money to design user interfaces, and I'm definitely not one of those people. I just try and go vaguely on what you've seen in live before. Kind of something. Oh god, this is going to be way too tall to fit in, isn't it? But you might kind of make a user interface a bit like this for this audio analyzer section. Yeah, that's going to be way too tall for the user interface though, isn't it? Let's try and find a way to shrink this in. And I want our nice little meter so we can see what the input volume is anyway. You might want to do stuff like change the volume obviously coming in and stuff like that. To be fair, we do probably want the volume control on the input as well. I'll add that in a bit if needed. Audio analyzer. So how could we lay this out not to be so useless? Probably we're going to need to widen it up a bit. So I need to do something like this, I reckon. probably going to add in a volume control because we do have an audio analyzer, and the granular effect itself is obviously getting audio from the same source, the same input of the device, and you might want to have the audio analyzer at a different volume to the gain here. And obviously, yeah, we're taking the audio clean from the input and we're then filtering it for this audio analyzer. We don't really want to be filtering the audio before going to record, because we can do that with effects earlier in the chains of devices here. It's just purely this audio analyzer section here. We might want to have different filtration or filtering and different audio volume compared to what is getting recorded. What even is this? Drop file. Oh yeah, we're going to have dropping files rather than audio input. That is going to be for another day. Making a good user interface for the audio analyzer and transient detector. We have now finished programming, which is great. I don't really care much for... do we need to have the word filter in here and the word threshold in here? What happens if we... oh, Jesus. That's going to say threshold. What happens if we just get these out of the presentation view for now and pretend they don't exist? And we just leave it like that, because we're getting low on space. You probably look really silly. Yeah, that looks really stupid, doesn't it? You could probably... can you make these a square in Ableton? Is that something you can do? I don't think you can. Anyway, I'm not going to spend any more time on this stupid user interface. Can these go horizontal? There must be a way. Yeah, horizontal. How about something like that? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Check. Yeah. How about that down here as well? How about something like that? Hopefully that's not too ugly. Check. Check. Cool, this is really low, isn't it? What about if we... oh, do I really see we're going to 1, don't we? Is this at a decent point? Yeah. We're getting scaled between 2 and 250. Yes. Why the hell did you change to 6K? 18K. Is that right? That's default. Yes. That's correct. Yes. That is correct. Yes. Cool. So we now have a audio analyzer section that, to be fair, is ugly as hell in terms of user interface, but is functioning, which is kind of where we wanted to get to, and I've just chucked it over here. It should probably go somewhere else for now. So this first, well, about an hour and a bit has been building a nice transient detector and envelope follower that we can use later in other bits of code, save it as an example, an abstraction, anything like that. For now I'm just going to leave it in here. But after all of this programming, what we are left with is a way to either map the amplitude of a signal to parameters in the device. I'm not going to be doing that at the minute, could in the future. And a way where we can map the on or detection of a transient and the release of a transient to parameters. And at least for now, that's what we want to do. So, as well as making nice pretty little interface things, what we want is we want to be able to send these bangs for a note on, for a note off, to other parts of the patch to use that data to control other things. So let's create a send. Let's say snapshot of 30. I don't know why I like 30, but it seems to be a good interval. I've been doing video stuff recently, and obviously most of that is working at 30 frames a second, at least for me. Maybe with a better computer I could be doing high frame rate stuff. But we're going to make a send to be able to send this data around. We are going to name it S, is obviously named the send object. We're going to use our triple hyphen prefix to the send, which makes sure this gets a random number added to it at the start, so the information from this audio analyzer will not be sent to any other device on other channels, in case we have multiple of these granular effects going on at the same time, which would be cool. I like color coding stuff, so I'm going to give it a send color code just so I can quickly scan around a patch and see what's going on. The send is called analyzer, and actually, wow, it's not going to be more than one type of analyzer in here, let's just leave it as analyzer. The envelope is going to be appended the word envelope, so that's going to be the envelope generated by the envelope follower, and what do I want to call this? Append transient onset and offset, no, transient on and off, attack and release, no, transient on and transient off for now. There's probably a better, if anyone can think of what the better audio terminology for those two things is, those two things are, let me know. 1, 2, 3, and that is the on, that is the off. I mean, note on doesn't really, phase on, note on, transient off. Yes. That doesn't quite look right. Cool. So that now, if we made a receive object somewhere over here, for example, and received analyzer, oops, don't mix up your American and UK spellings, we should be getting a shitload of information from the envelope, so we can route out this data. So yeah, using sends and receives to send data around patches and then route out the information you need somewhere else. An example of that would now look like the envelope is coming out here. We can also route out the transient onset, check, check, and the transient off, check. Cool. And that's our data from the audio analyzer getting piped through a send and receive pair, so we can receive that data anywhere and actually do something with it. So where do we want to actually do something with this information? Let's make ourselves more space again, because we haven't used up too much space. I wish there was a way in Max to quickly make more space. I like to clear area, to clear more area than you just select here and just say move everything out of the way. There probably is, just like when I complained about something last week and then discovered it already existed in Max. Maybe what happens when you've been using something for so long and you don't keep up with these newfangled inventions and features, or at least not the ones that you don't even realise they exist. One other trick for making space in Max is to put a bang in the bottom right corner and drag it way down out the way, and now we've got way more patch space to scroll down to. Weird tracks in Max. Anyway, so we've got our analyzer information, we are getting transient on and transient off. Now we actually want that to do something useful in the patch. Hopefully we can get that finished within the next half an hour or so, and I think we'll have to call it there. Having another cool feature on our granular effect, and it's just going to keep building up until it's an absolute beast. And this is cool stuff. Hopefully anyway, but again, after this it will be even more usable with another nice little feature added to it. So, what we want to happen, again, like I was rambling about at the beginning of this video, when a transient is detected, I want to grab whatever the current record position is. So we could be sending these around individual sends. We could end up just with one send and receive pair, which is what I normally do. For now I'm just going to program this a bit ugly like. and just grab this number here. Actually, I'm going to run it into a floating point object. Let's say it's going to default to to 0. But effectively, if I take the output of this, so at the bottom of the record object, we get spat out the current position between 0 and 1 in the buffer. So I happen to know our buffer is 5 seconds long, which is defined here because that's our rolling record buffer length. And you can see at the bottom here we're getting spat a position between 0 and 1 for where we currently are in that buffer, where we're recording, what the recording position is. So that's that number there. And here, basically, when you send a number into the right inlet of the right cold inlet, I don't know if I explained hot and cold inlets, but often if you run things into a right-hand inlet rather than, which is what's known as a cold inlet, which has a blue circle around it, rather than a hot inlet, the number will not trigger an output, it will just be stored. So you should see, we're basically just continually storing the record position in here. If I now loop in our transient on into here, you can see whenever I make a transient, it should bang out the bottom the current record position we are when that transient was made between 0 and 1, which is fine, we can work with that. And I'm just going to quickly add a print at the bottom here and actually print it to the console so we can get a better stream of what the value is. Check, 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 check. We can kind of see that matches up. If I try and make a loud noise roughly halfway through, check, we can see it spits out something around 0.5, which is what we are expecting. Cool, so now basically our transient is triggering us to get information on what the current position is in 0 to 1. We need to convert, we don't even need to convert that, do we? Think about it, James. Brain. Third person is a bit weird. Is it second person? No, for that moment. Yeah, so, start position. We are actually controlling the start position from outside our granular bit of code. We're controlling the start position in a percentage. So we're basically controlling it in between 0 and 1. 0 to 100 is percent is how these are working. But basically we're, for these kind of relative positions, because again this sample size could be, we could be working with different buffer sizes. We could hopefully next time or sometime, trying to get time with how many features I want to add to this. We want to be able to drag and drop in our own samples. So we could be working with different sample sizes in milliseconds. At the minute we've basically locked it to 5,000 milliseconds or 5 seconds, and we're continually recording into that buffer. But in other occasions when we start dropping in files or adding in ways to change these buffer sizes, we don't want to be working in hard-coded figures, we want to be working in relative figures. So 0 to 1 is really useful to us, which is why stuff like the start and duration happen in relative percentage terms. So I was just then going to program in something that converted from 0 to 1 into sample time, which you could do quite easily by doing something like this. So whenever the number changes, we bang out what the current sample size is, and we multiply the two together, and that would effectively tell us the result in relative 0 to 1 position, and also in actual milliseconds within the buffer. Check. Check. Cool. Check. So that one's right near the end, so yeah, about 5 milliseconds. Sorry, 5,000 milliseconds, here 5 seconds. And yeah, a bit of a late addition buffer, so that's ways you could do that, but again, as I just remembered after looking at this, we're actually operating in 0 to 1 anyway, so this output position of the record buffer is totally fine with us. And if we just pipe that straight into the start here, we should in theory be setting the start position immediately. I'll kind of wire this up in a slightly ugly way at first, just to get the point across, and check it's working. But generally speaking, in Max for Live, when programming Max for Live devices, you don't want to be or at least I haven't found a good way to make it work, but you don't want to be changing and automating parameters of the device from within the device. Say if you had this MIDI mapped and you started changing the position of it, you can kind of mess with things that are going on. If you map this, for example, because of the way automation currently works in live, or modulation, sorry, if we mapped a Max for Live LFO to this from outside this device, although we're going to add that functionality in ourselves, if we someone decided to download this device, start using it and map an LFO, so sweep in the start time, you can't control a parameter from two places in the current implementation of how Max for Live and the parameters work. So if we were trying to control the parameter from inside the code, and we also then tried to map an outside LFO, there'd be some weird conflicts and just stuff wouldn't work and it'd get ugly. So generally speaking, you don't control parameters from inside a Max for Live device. You build some kind of extra system where this just sets the kind of the bias or the start position, and then the internal automation modulates kind of around a percentage of it, which is something that kind of makes sense in the way we generally think of modulating and adding internal LFO envelopes to synths. Anyway, but to give you an ugly example of something we could do, we could take the output of this now, we could make a trigger object to send it to multiple places, we could send it to two places, we could immediately send it into the start position, because the start position takes from 0 to 1. We could then, this is a slightly cleaner way than just plugging this straight in here, by the way. So one output, the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to set the start position of where the grains are going to start playing from. Great. Next thing we're going to do is multiply this from 0 to 1, so we actually want this to get into a percentage range. Oh no, brain's terrible. Multiply by 100, and that should get us, should get us from from about 0 to 100. That's a good percentage range, which means we can set this dial just as a nice user interface feature, although again I'd probably maybe, you know, like live parameters have this little orange thing that appears around them when you modulate them. Maybe we'd do something a bit fancy like that in the future. But if we want to set a control in Max or in Max for Live without triggering its output, which is what we want to do here, I think you want to do the prepend set, or is it set value? Set should work. Some of the other controls take set value as a message rather than set, but I think set an output value, but set should do the job. So what we should get now, and again we're going to tidy up all this cabling using send and receives, so cables aren't flying all over our code. Ooh, there you go. Check, check, check. So as I'm hitting transients throughout the recording, it is setting the dial around to the right position for where that transient is, which is what we want. So that should in theory mean I could actually start the grains running, play some notes, and as I'm playing the notes we should effectively be moving the start position just to the right point in that recording buffer and automatically granularizing it. We might have to do a little bit of fancy stuff of technically maybe moving the start position a tiny bit behind or something like that, but for now so we've got a start position, that's going to be changing. A little bit of nice randomization on the start position. Duration we're going to shrink down just so we can hear what's going on a bit better. Direction we'll leave being random. Random panning always helps, a bit of random volume automation always helps. And now let's do an audio test. I hope it actually does something useful. Useful. A few more grains to happen. More grains to happen. can see one thing that's happening. You can see one thing that's happening at the minute is because we're overwriting the buffer constantly. When it spins round to the next 5 seconds, the buffer will actually have disappeared. So one thing we'll probably add is a way for the buffer to duplicate itself. So onto another clean buffer. So maybe we'll have effectively a recording buffer and a separate playback buffer. And whenever this gets triggered, whenever the new playback gets triggered to happen, it would effectively write that current record buffer into the play buffer, and then that'd hold on forever granularizing. But at the minute, if I say play a note on this thumb piano, it will hold on it and granularize it, but then after the 5 seconds, that position on the buffer will effectively have been overwritten, and that's why you also get some weird glitches and crackles as that's happening as well. But anyway, it seems to be working. I'll just play with it a tiny bit more. But you should hear some thumb piano coming through, and that last bit of it should, in theory, kind of get granularized and held onto for around 5 seconds until it gets overwritten. It's kind of working. Thank God for that. The last hour and 40 minutes went to waste. Yeah, so what we managed to finally get cracking in that example is transient detection. Transient detection is then setting the start position of where we're currently granularizing or playing back, and that's allowing us to basically play short stabs of notes or chords or phrases that are held onto until the next is received. So we can play things with quite a short release, but effectively they'll be held onto and granularized for a longer period of time. So some things we might want to add after even just playing with that is I think we want an on and off switch for the audio analyzer, because we want to be able to trigger when the transients are being happening, because we might want to hold a nice long chord for longer than is currently happening. One way to do that would be to add in a live.text, and I'm just going to make this say enable. For some, I really hate buttons that say on and then off. Although it's kind of clear in live actually. Screw it, I just said that. Let's change what I just said. Because sometimes with these buttons, maybe it's just me, but I'm never sure if is the on, is the off, the off? Is by pressing this, am I going to turn it to being off? I mean, the lighting obviously in Ableton knowledge makes that quite clear, but in other buttons it sometimes confuses me if you're not familiar with the software, it's not nicely designed. The other thing is we can actually just make the audio analyzer title itself a button that you can toggle, so that's much clearer when you click audio analyzer on or off. We may actually do that in a sec. Off and on button, long name, analyzer, enable, because enable generally, I guess, is a better word for whether something is on or off, or at least I find it to be. Defaulting to on. No defaulting to off at the start position coming up now, we'll do the time. And if we quickly add a multiplication, so we can close this signal off, and we're going to want to fade it a bit, because actually changing really sharply, quickly turning the signal off without any fading would probably effectively often lead to a change in transient, because that really quick change from a signal to no signal would create like a bit of a trigger or a bang. Sorry, a bit of a sharp change in the signal that would effectively not do nice things, and we keep calling it transient when we actually triggered it on or off. It could mess with the playing with the start position. So similar to what we've done before, we are going to set what we want the value to be. This is just going from 0 to 1, so off or on. I'm going to pass through that signal at the same time. We're going to set the line to ramp to that new value over 8 milliseconds, which creates a smoothing effect and stops kind of zero offset clicks when you're changing, really sharply changing between one value and down to 0, or from no value up to whatever's coming in. So that is a on-off control with smoothing built in. God, I need to tidy up this code at some point. Audio analyzer, let's chuck a on and off button here. To be honest, I might actually just make this button be the audio analyzer as well, because that actually looks better. Audio analyzer. Oh, God, I'm mixing up American and English spelling all the time. But that'll do. Get rid of this. Chuck you up here, all the way over here, and now we've actually just got a nice big on and off button for the audio analyzer. Check, check, check. Check, 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 check. And next we're going to check this down here so we can see the output of the outputted volume of what's going on. I am going to need to make some more space, so we're quickly just going to shrink this view out a bit and grab all of this code and chuck it out there over here. I'm going to need to drag all of this down a bit more. For some reason I like things being in blocks of 3 because it fits that object in between. Which is why I'm always tapping on 3s to move things up and down. And lastly, we do actually want a volume control as well, I think, which is nearly exactly the same as an on-off. But rather than just having a simple button on and then off, we are going to want to be able to control the level of the volume with a simple box, I think. Although we could either wipe it again and get rid of this meter at the same time. Screw it, let's just do this now. Live.numbox. Add you in here. And we want it to be analyzer. I can't remember if I've typed the last of these with an S in UK spelling or with American spelling. Generally Ableton and most programming happens in American spellings, so I keep mixing them up all the time, like colour. If you're ever using the word colour and you type it the English spelling, you're trying to control the colour of a parameter or a bit of programming, it always doesn't have a U basically, so you always need to remember that. Range, it's a volume, so we're going from like -70 up to, you might even want to boost to 6 for some reason if it's really quiet, why not? Initial volume should be 0, just like we'd expect, and we are operating in loudness or decibels. Blah 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 blah. That looks good to me. Put you in the user interface. Drag you up a bit again. Be really anal and make sure you are exactly free away from everything else. Stop caring about these things so much, it doesn't matter. Cool, so that was adding a on-off and a volume. Oh god, is ugly as hell, but the volume's going there for now. Cool, so to the audio analyzer we also added a volume, so we can edit the volume, and we can also turn it on and off. So the other thing I need to do is set these to default to... pretty clever. This is operating in decibels, this is a linear circuit, so we need a dB to a converter in there like we've used before. That means it will actually work correctly, and although we're going to have this default to being off, the volume should default to being on. There you go, now the volume is coming through correctly. So now, save don't crash, thank you very much. We've now got a volume control and an on and off, so we should more simply be able to do stuff like hold notes and trigger them off again to make sure another note doesn't come through. So we should be able to do something like... Not too much you said, but the idea being you could trigger it to start grabbing onto one transient and turn this off to play more notes over the top without it overwriting it. Let's have a quick go at that and see if it actually works. So the first time I play a note, it will grab the transient unset, set the start position and start granularizing it. Then I'm going to turn the audio analyzer off, so stop it setting the start point, and then we'll be able to play over the top. Although at this minute only for 5 seconds until it actually overwrites it. Let's see if this works. So we'd also probably need to add in something that muted the input volume to the device as well. So we don't technically need this on and off, I was just thinking about it wrong. So if I think about it correctly now, using my brain a bit better, we'd actually just want to mute the volume before the input point, probably with just a simple mapping of an effect in live, because basically we'd probably want to just limit the record buffer. Anyway, you could do things with having a nice MIDI mapped controller, mapping the audio coming in and mapping the record on and off. So when you kind of hit a nice transient, you could do something like it would stop the recording buffer recording over that last note and just kind of granularize it for a while. Can I do something a bit like that quickly? Possibly yes. Let's try this one more time and see if I can get it to work. So I'm going to try and play a chord, have it, analyze it, grab the transient, set the start position to the start of that chord, and then you should be able to improvise like a little melodic line over the top of that without the transient affecting that, and with the granularizer still just granularizing around that buffer. Let's see if it actually works. relatively successfully worked. Excuse my poor melodica playing. It's been a long time since I tried to use one of them, and I've never been very good at piano scales. Anyway, so things in key, and also the compressor and stuff on this mic is generally set up to make my generally quiet voice sound a bit louder, so it was peaking and kind of clipping a few bits when I blew a bit too loudly into that melodica. But yes, generally it's kind of working how I wanted it to. So with a bit of MIDI mapping, maybe say MIDI mapping a foot controller or something like that if you're using an instrument which takes up both hands like the melodica, although luckily you could get another. Or just a nice MIDI controller on the table or something if you know you're playing a keyboard or something. You could quite easily MIDI map this record button on and off and the audio analyzer on and off to allow you to play a chord, hold it, granularize it, improvise on top, and it will just granularize endlessly, and then the next time you play a note, turn it on and play another chord, it will kind of hold that chord, you can then improvise on top of that one, that kind of thing, which hopefully was slightly demonstrated by that poor melodica rendition, which always for me end up sounding a bit like kind of sea shanty or something. Maybe it sounds a bit like an accordion when I somehow relate those two things in my head. Only got a few minutes left. We are not going, something I started about 10 or 15 past, so I'll just do another quick 15 minutes, finishing things up a bit. You probably would want to tidy up this code a bit. We don't want things like this flying all over here. Oh, that's ugly. You also might want to building a mapping system, so rather than it just being hard coded to control the start, you could have a little menu that allowed you to select it to trigger the start position or something, some kind of on and off, extra on and off control in here, as well as it doing this analyzer thing and allowing us to have user interface controls to control the analyzer. I'd kind of like a little modulation or mapping thing on the right here where we could turn on and off the start position mapping. So to do that, this is normally more sending a receive things than I use, because you kind of, I kind of generally like just having one send and receive pipe and sending all the data over that, but I'm going to do it a bit ugly for now. I'm just going to record this, call this record position, to send, so the position is getting sent over this send here. Kind of like that. And then you can get rid of this cable here. You can grab this like this. We can call this record position instead, so we've got rid of one ugly bit of cabling. We're not using the envelope for anything, we're just using transient on, so let's get rid of these. And yeah, in our modulation matrix kind of thing, where we might want to map this or like these analyzed parameters to various things, the other thing I think I quite like would be something where the actual grains get triggered to turn on and off. Maybe at some delays when there's transients, because you could do a thing where a note effectively immediately gets harmonization stuff triggering around it, and then as soon as you stop playing, it would kind of stop the granular playing. Or you could do the reverse, might be better actually. Whenever you start playing a note, the grains stop. While you're talking, the granular is kind of muted, or it's like a side. You can kind of side chain the granular basically, and then when you stop saying something, the granular would actually turn on. So you kind of want, for now, let's just chuck a live text in here. We'll think of something better in a second. We're just going to want this to go to one position in this case. So can you do this? I never use, so I always use date. Why do I never know what switch does? I was just using gate, just gate 1 0. That'll do, really. Yeah. Gate. So a gate, we can just toggle things on and off. This should do the job. So we're kind of going to call this live comment. Ooh, not that. Modulation matrix is a fancy word for it because there's not much modulating, it's more just on and off. It's going to happen, but I'm sticking with it for now. Live button to turn on and off. It is going to be off and then on when it's on, and it's going to be called something like start position. It's only happening when the transient's detected, not like you're mapping the envelope and LFO to it, which is what we actually want to map in a bit. I'll have to think of a better way to label this, but the point is it's going to be able to turn it on and off from a button for now, because one of the things you also classically want to do is actually be able to map like a synced LFO to control the start position, because that can get you some time stretching effects like beats mode. Beats mode in Ableton's warping algorithm is kind of basically a granular kind of engine, and by controlling the pitch separately to the start position or the time it takes to move through the sample, you can do kind of basic kind of granular time stretching stuff. So we're going to want to be able to do that. So this modulation matrix and the start is the very start of our modulation matrix section. Again, I've got a user interface we will put it up at some point. This says start, it's kind of useless. This basically turns on and off this audio analyzer, affecting the start position or not. Check, check, check. What happened here? 2 milliseconds. 254, yeah. Minus 20, yeah. Minus 6, yeah. 80 and 18. And the volume is 0. Transient, please. Check. Check. Did I put these the other way around? Is that what's happening? Check. I think I did. I'm not recording this, why it's not changing. Check. 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 Yeah, cool. So that turns on and off whether the audio analyzer modulates the start position and sets the time correctly. So another thing you might want to be able to MIDI map basically, would be very handy to MIDI map if you're using this as a live performance tool. We might want to modulate more of these, so we're going to maybe make these things more. You could use the envelope follower. The main thing you want to be able to automatically do is have a LFO, a synced LFO, that modulates the start position to move up in time, either freely or with hertz. That allows you to design some cool kind of time stretching stuff. Let's have a think about how we could do that really quickly. This engine doesn't need an audio rate LFO because we are not happening at audio rate. We basically just need a really simple counter. To do that, we're going to want to design something that can go up from 0 to 1. It doesn't matter how smooth it is really, because it's kind of like kind of grains are happening quite, there's a sample and hold algorithm in here that isn't making it happen all the time anyway. So we can actually design a metronome. Let's say it happens 30 times. Again, I don't know why I'm choosing 30, but that's actually the same as what this snapshot would be. Every time you receive a bang, you are going to tell a counter to increase, and it's going to increase from, what are the arguments for counter? How do I use counter? I'm going to use it counting upwards, but you're going to loop from, what are the goddamn flying arguments for this? With one argument, counter loop upwards between 0 and the argument. With 2 arguments, counter loop upwards between them. If there's 3 arguments, counter treats the first argument as a mode, so upwards, yes. Next 2 arguments are the loop endpoints. So that should mean, I hate arguments. Why isn't everything attributes these days? Doesn't have attributes. Loop upwards is 0. Cool. Let's say we're going to loop, I think if I remember the arguments correctly, we want to loop from 0 upwards. Sorry, 0 is going to go forwards. Again, we might want to flip that at some point and have it go backwards for weird backwards effects. But for now, let's imagine forwards, and we're going to go from 0 to God, I've never really built. How long has it been since I built a data-based envelope rather than audio? Sorry, a data-based LFO rather than audio one. Effectively, I'm trying to design something that ramps up from 0 to 100, kind of like that. Kind of really don't like the way this is working now, so I'm actually going to scrap the whole thing and make an audio rate 1. And at some point in the future, we're going to look at this again and make a non-audio rate 1, because technically this doesn't really need to be audio. But again, we're designing a modulation matrix, so we can modulate some parameters. We're setting the start point based on transient position here. We're also now making a really simple LFO, at least simple for now. That's going to allow us to move this start position based on some other things. We're going to have a gate in here as well to trigger control whether this happens or not. Phaser outputs from 0 to 1, and it's basically a ramp in LFO. So if I set the its argument is in hertz, so if we set 0.5 hertz, that's going to take 2 seconds, it's going to ramp from 0 to 1, just upwards like this, which is perfect for our simple LFO experiment we're going to mess around with. For now, we won't have time to quite finish it off properly, but I'll leave it in this for now. This is getting snapshotted every 30 milliseconds, and this thing here is actually already doing us some favours and sending it through to the start point and scaling it so it shows the dial correctly. So if we actually just plug this right in here, we should end up with an LFO we can turn on or off to automatically control the start point. And our new modulation matrix section. The other thing you obviously want to be able to do with a phaser is probably reset the phase. You can also do things with phaser like lock them. So what we want to do basically is build a system where this gets tempo locked and tempo synced to the timeline in Ableton. So we can have phasers that are happening at quarter note bars, 2 bars, rather than working in hertz. And we can lock the phase of them so they actually, if you had a 1 bar loop, the start of it would actually, on the downbeat of every bar, it would be back at 0. And you can unlock the phase so it can be free running, but linked in hertz at the same time. So we'd probably have a button that would hit the phase, we'd also be able to lock the phase, and we'd have a way of switching between working in milliseconds and working in beats, bars, and ticks, or whatever they're called, in terms of being locked to the transport. For now, we don't have time to do that in this session, so I want to finish up pretty soon. So we're just quickly going to put in a unsynced time control, so that the unsynced version is going to be in hertz. Again, if we wanted to make one in bars, beats, and ticks and stuff like that, and divisions of bars, we'd do that in a slightly different way, but we're going to do that next time. This is going to be LFO hertz. We're going to rename all of these because maybe we'll have more than one LFO, and then we're definitely going to need more than one thing. And 0 is effectively going to turn it off. We don't need to do that, but why not? You really don't need to go that high on this. If you even went up anywhere near 100 hertz, it would actually just go bonkers, wouldn't it? I mean, that's just kind of pointlessly excessive, isn't it? We're not even going to need to go above like 10 times a second, really, are we? That's already just madness. That's kind of usable. Yeah, you don't need to go above 5, it's just silliness, isn't it? This is the kind of thing that really you just want to be happening most of the time. you just need to be happening in a synth fashion, but we will leave it anyway because we want an LFO. So this is one other thing added to our modulation matrix, which is an LFO. I'm going to label this LFO on and off. Hopefully that will be obvious enough. That is the LFO speed. We are going to create a new label actually. Live.comment. We're going to call it start position because we're going to have a series of things that we can use to modulate the start position. We've got an LFO to modulate the start position. This is going to default to happening 0.95, which is once every 4 seconds. So initially enable that to 0.95. I need to figure out where that can display more numerals before it hits. There's not a way to do that with a live object. We might use something else. But we can turn an LFO on or off that can control this, which is useful. You should default to being off. You should also default to being off. And we're going to want to rename you to transient on to define or to show that we are mapping the transient on to control to set the start position. Although it's technically the transient on setting the start position in relation to the chord position, we will find a way to clearly label all of this stuff at some point. But in our modulation matrix, we now have a way to map a transient being detected to set the play position to the current record position, and we have a way to have an LFO controlling the start position. So let's just quickly try and mess around with that. What I will do is record a 5-second loop, so transient off for now. We messed with the transient, it was fun. Now we're going to mess with doing kind of simple time stretching stuff with our granular algorithm and see how that works. Maybe we can play some drum breaks or something into it in a set quickly. But let's have a mess with this LFO and see if it's doing what I think it should do. Let's try and record something into the buffer. Cool, that should be kind of a phrase in the buffer. If we... Let's try this one more time. Set in the buffer. Slow these frames down a little bit. Now, let's try and... So if we move the start position along, it should effectively just move through the passage. Almost kind of like a little bit of time stretching there. because we can decouple the pitch from the playback speed of this 5-second long loop. Although not quite accurately enough yet, because we won't be able to set this in hertz and tweak these just right, but kind of is doing that work. Hello, I think we've now got basic time stretching. Yeah, so that's kind of some weird basic kind of time stretching sounds you can get kind of using a granular engine to play back through a loop. Let's do one more thing and see what happens if we put a drum break in there. Where do we have some kind of RMNs? So this should basically just be an RMN smashing into here now. Let's see what happens. Turn off the grains just for now in case it does something weird. Turned it off. So that should be a load of drum recording into the buffer. Right, what the hell does this sound like? So if we kind of almost went back to play this near normally, it would probably sound something a bit like something like this. So that's the basic run break we just recorded into it. As we kind of lower the amount of grains that are happening, and we shrink that duration down to a really small amount of time, and we start to modulate the start position, so it's effectively playing through that break beat, and we're just getting really little snippets in time, we kind of end up with a kind of weird time stretching granular version of the loop. slash thumb piano slash melodica thing, improvising though. One last go using, rather than the LFO, which kind of obviously good working doing some more time stretching stuff. Instead, I'm going to try and use the audio analyzer to control the start position and allow us to do some weird chordal stuff. Grabbing the start of the chord, setting the position to there and granularizing it a bit, then allowing us to improvise over the top of it. Audio channel on, so we're getting the audio into the buffer. And let's see if this actually works. But we've kind of done at least one of the things. I'm not there with pitch, but we've at least done one of the things I wanted to accomplish in today's video, so I think it's time to wrap it up. So this time we managed to add a envelope follower, kind of audio analyzer slash envelope follower. So again, we got the audio, summed it into mono, multiplied it down a little bit so it was not too loud in case both left and right channels are loud. We've got a way to turn it on and off smoothly so it doesn't cause clicks. We've got a way to set the volume coming into the audio analyzer that is separate to the volume that's going into the actual record buffer, in case we want to have different volumes or thresholds triggering compared to what's getting recorded. we have filters on the low and high, so we basically made a kind of bandpass filter so we can filter out what sections of the audio we want to trigger, or be envelope followed and trigger transient, so we can get rid of low rumbles or weird high sounds or something if they're in the signal. We then make the signal, force it to be absolute, so our envelope follower nicely works in a kind of unipolar range from 0 up to 1, rather than more like an LFO going up to 1 and down to -1. Could maybe change that a bit, but generally speaking, envelope follower is always unipolar. We've used a slide object to logarithmically smooth or filter fast changes out, so instead of working in a very fast audio signal and waveform, we're smoothing it out to become a more useful envelope follower we can use for automation. And then we're using a threshold object to detect whether when the volume goes above a certain threshold, when it dips below a certain threshold, and we're using the edge object to detect so that's giving us basically a bang when the onset happens, bang when the release happens. We're then sending those values of a transient on, transient off envelope over a send channel. That is our audio analyzer, bit of volume filtering, smoothing, getting the thresholds, so we've got an envelope following a transient detector, and we can then build some kind of modulation matrix, which we've kind of started to do over here, where we can map different parameters to control parts of the synth engine. So for now we just mapped a transient on to get what the current record position is and set the record position to that position of the buffer, so we kind of granularize the last held note, and we also quickly, just for fun, chucked in a simple LFO that allowed us to LFO the start position as well, to do some kind of basic almost time stretching by kind of scanning that start position through the recorded buffer. We haven't actually made any changes to the inside of the granular engine, but that's fine because we actually programmed it so far really nicely, so it's all nice and clean. So all we needed to do this episode was actually add extra functionality to control it in new ways, allowing us to do more cool things with it that we couldn't do before. We haven't got around to pitch quantizing yet, so at the minute when we change the pitch and we add pitch random, it is generating a random number into the pitch that's just anywhere floating point between -48 and 48, so we can end up with weird values like plus 12.7 semitones, which is obviously a microtonal thing. To quantize this, we're going to make it just chromatic quantizing, we could have just kind of force all these numbers not to be floating point. So then to make it chromatic, we only ever get values that are a set semitone, so there's no value after decimal point. That would immediately get rid of any weird microtonal stuff and just limit us to get chromatic values of semitones when the pitch is randomized. Next thing we're going to add is a way next week to actually select scales, which will allow you to set it to only randomly jump to specific semitone values. So you want to make a nice minor scale or minor pentatonic and only have it jump to the minor third and the fifth, flat fifth, whatever, minor seventh. You'd be able to select those maybe on a little keyboard interface or just writing in some numbers, and it'll only randomize rather than just scaling fully between these values at floating point. It would make sure there was no decimal values, and then it would actually only let you randomly select between a certain range of numbers you'd entered in. Maybe you'd have a nice menu option where you could actually, in a drop down menu, select scales such as minor, major, minor pentatonic, major pentatonic, all the modes, Lydian, Dorian, Mixolydian, all those weird things as well. We'd build that in next time. I definitely have a good idea about how we can add that in and make a nice interface for it, so that shouldn't be too hard, and that will be fun for doing immediate. Now we've got this transient detector working, and it's immediately detecting a transient and granularizing it. With the automatic pitch randomizing, it would effectively allow us to kind of almost play with the computer, because when we play a chord, or say we're playing a note, we could play a note in, the granularizer, granulator, whatever, would immediately start playing that note, granulated, but start randomizing the pitch within a scale, so it would almost start improvising, playing within a scale on the note we just played in, we can then improvise on top of that while they're playing back and forth against the granulator, and so on and so on. So it almost allows you to kind of use it as a kind of improv partner or something, doing weird call and response things to its randomized engine. If you turn the randomization off and just set a stable pitch, it will allow you to do stuff like have an automatic granular harmonizer, which we could already kind of do actually, but yeah, if you can play in notes, it'll automatically play it back at a harmonized pitch, different to what you're playing. So we can add all that pitch quantization, goodness, next time tidy up this modulation matrix and add other things if needed, LFOs to control other parameters, or maybe the envelope to actually control some of these parameters, although I can't think which ones are actually that useful for the minute, but it's a possibility. Pitch quantizing, better modulation matrix, and finally one other thing we're going to add, just to give you an idea of what you could add to something like this as well, is at the minute faffing around, triggering this record buffer on and off and stuff like that's a bit of faff. And we're kind of only operating on this one record buffer and playing it back. I think we're sometimes getting clicks due to that, and also just because I've compressed the mic for my voice, which is a bit different to what's needed for the louder monitor and stuff. But I'd probably change to having both a record buffer and a play buffer. So the record buffer is continuously being recorded into, and if we want, we can actually granularize and play back that live buffer if we want to. But what we could switch to doing instead is having recording continuously happening in this record buffer, just looping around and around, and then whenever we say detector transient, or we turn the granular effect on by pressing the big grain on button whenever I move that, that would actually trigger the record buffer to get copied into a separate play buffer, which would get played back, which would mean the record buffer, especially with the transient detection and stuff, we'd never overwrite the playing buffer unless we wanted to. So that would better allow us to do that thing I was trying to accomplish earlier of playing in a note or chord, having that chord held and granulated while I then solo over the top of it, then be able to trigger another one without having to trigger all this record on and off quite so much. That would work better if we added in a second play buffer and switched when the play buffer was getting the recorded audio, either all the time or only occasionally when we trigger it to happen. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope I didn't ramble too much, and hopefully some of this audio analyzer stuff was at least understandable, and maybe you can copy parts of it and use it in your own devices or patches if needed. Again, next week we're going to add a separate play buffer so this transient triggering works a bit better. We're going to add in a better start modulation matrix, and we're going to add in scale quantizing. And by then we might even be at a point where the device is kind of just nice and usable. Oh, we're going to have to do something really boring and add in better envelopes, but that's for another time. I'll try and actually think of a better way to do that outside of the work, the live stream, so we can just get that out of the way quick, because that's going to be a load of really boring maths. We just want a way to quickly select different envelopes. Yeah, so I'll be back in a week's time, probably on a Sunday or a different day if I decide different evenings are better. If anyone has a strong opinion on other evenings being better, let me know. But for now, I'm going to go and make some dinner and finish this up. Thanks again for anyone watching, and hopefully see you next week. Cheers.